Hello and welcome. If you enjoy calm stories like this, tap like and subscribe for a new one each week. Let's begin. Find a place of quiet comfort now. A place where you can let the day dissolve. Let your body grow heavy and your breath grow soft. Imagine the air around you is turning cool and sweet. It carries the scent of damp earth and olive trees. Before your closed eyes, a soft gray light begins to bloom. This is the light of dawn in the Tuscan hills, a light from more than 500 years ago. With each slow breath, you feel yourself drifting back through time. The sounds of the modern world fade away, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant call of a bird. You are here, in this peaceful past, to walk alongside a gentle soul, a man whose curiosity was as boundless as the sky. Let your mind be a quiet stream, ready to receive this story. There is nothing for you to do but listen, and breathe, and drift. We will begin at the beginning, in a small town under a soft Italian sun. And as our story unfolds, you can let go and allow yourself to float gently, into a deep and restorative sleep. Chapter 1: Child of Tuscany. In the heart of Tuscany, where hills roll like green waves against the sky, lies the small town of Vinci. It is a place of stone houses, of winding paths, of olive groves, whose leaves shimmer silver in the breeze. Here, on the 15th of April, in the year 1452, a child was born. His name was Leonardo. He was born in the third hour of the night, a detail his grandfather carefully noted in a family diary. A quiet entry for a quiet arrival. Leonardo's father was a respected notary named Ser Piero. His mother was a young peasant woman named Caterina. They were not married, and in the eyes of the world, this made their son, Leonardo, illegitimate. But this status, which might have been a shadow, became for him a strange kind of freedom. He was not expected to follow his father into the world of legal documents and dusty books. His path was unwritten, his future his own to draw. He spent his earliest years not in a bustling city, but in the countryside, in the small hamlet of Anciano. Here, his world was not defined by walls, but by the vast, open classroom of nature. His senses were his first teachers. He felt the rough bark of an olive tree under his small hands. He watched the slow, determined journey of a snail across a wet leaf. He smelled the rain before it fell, a clean, earthy scent rising from the soil. More than anything, two things captured his young imagination: water and flight. He would sit for hours by the Arno River or any small stream that tumbled through the hills. He was not just looking at the water, he was studying it. He saw the way it curled into eddies and whirlpools, tiny spirals of energy. He saw how it flowed around a smooth, gray stone, parting and rejoining without effort. He watched the light dance on its surface, 1,000 tiny suns shattering and reforming. In his mind, he was already sketching these movements, trying to understand the hidden rules that governed its flow. He saw that water was both gentle and powerful, a shaper of landscapes and a source of life. It was a mystery he would pursue for the rest of his days. And then there were the birds. He would lie in the tall grass, his head pillowed on his arms, and watch them. He saw the kites, soaring high above, riding invisible currents of air with the slightest tilt of a wing. He saw the frantic, whirring beat of a hummingbird's wings, a blur of motion that seemed to defy gravity. He didn't just see birds, he saw the mechanics of flight. He saw the way their feathers cupped the air, the way their bodies angled to catch the wind. There is a story, one he himself wrote down much later in life, of a memory from his cradle. A red kite, he recalled, flew down to him. It opened his mouth with its tail and struck him many times between the lips. A strange, dreamlike image. Perhaps it was a real memory, perhaps a dream, but it speaks to this deep, early connection he felt with the creatures of the air. It was as if the secret of flight had brushed against him from the very beginning. His education was informal. He learned to read and write, of course. He learned basic mathematics, the kind a merchant might use. But his real study was observation. He carried a small notebook with him, tucked into his belt. And he drew. He drew the petals of a flower, noticing the perfect geometry in their arrangement. He drew the intricate patterns on a dragonfly's wing. He drew the changing expressions on the faces of the farmers and villagers he met. His eye was a lens, and his hand was its faithful servant. He was learning to see the world with a clarity that few possessed. This boy, this child of Tuscany, was quiet and gentle and endlessly curious. He was not just looking at the world, he was questioning it. How does a river bend? How does a bird stay aloft? What makes the sky blue? These were not idle questions. They were the seeds of a lifetime of exploration. In the quiet fields of Vinci, surrounded by the hum of bees and the scent of wild herbs, a mind unlike any other was taking shape. The sun set over the hills, painting the sky in soft shades of rose and violet, and the boy Leonardo would watch, committing the colors to memory, his mind already full of flowing water and soaring wings. Chapter 2. Florentine Apprentice. When Leonardo was about 14 years old, his father, Ser Piero, recognized that his son's talent was something extraordinary. The countryside could teach him no more. It was time for him to learn a craft, to find a place where his artistic gifts could be shaped and polished. And in the mid-15th century, there was no better place for a budding artist than the vibrant, competitive, and breathtakingly creative city of Florence. Imagine stepping into Florence for the first time. The air is thick with the sounds of creation. The chime of a goldsmith's hammer, the scrape of a sculptor's chisel against marble, the murmur of merchants and poets in the piazza. And rising above it all, the magnificent dome of the cathedral, a testament to human ingenuity. Ser Piero took his son to one of the most prestigious workshops in the city, the bottega of Andrea del Verrocchio. Verrocchio was a master of all trades. He was a painter, a sculptor, a goldsmith, an engineer. His studio was not a quiet, solitary place. It was a bustling, collaborative hub of activity. To enter Verrocchio's workshop was to be immersed in a world of sensory richness. The air smelled of linseed oil, of turpentine, of melting wax and hot metal. Dust motes, glittering with gold leaf, danced in the shafts of light that fell from the high windows. Young apprentices, boys even younger than Leonardo, were busy with their tasks. One would be grinding pigments, crushing minerals like lapis lazuli into fine, brilliant blue powder. Another would be preparing wooden panels for painting, carefully applying layers of gesso, a smooth, white ground, like preparing a canvas of fresh snow. There were boys casting plaster, others learning to draw, all moving with a sense of purpose under the watchful eye of the master. Leonardo began, as all apprentices did, with the most basic tasks. He swept the floors. He mixed pigments. He learned the chemistry of colors, which ones would last, which ones would fade, how to bind them with egg yolk for tempera painting, or with oil for the newer techniques coming from the north. He learned how to handle brushes made from fine animal hairs, how to prepare a surface, how to cast bronze. It was a rigorous, hands-on education, but it quickly became clear that Leonardo was no ordinary apprentice. His powers of observation, honed in the fields of Vinci, now had a new focus. He studied the fall of drapery, the way fabric folded and creased over the human form. Verrocchio would have his apprentices draw from clay models, draped in cloth, soaked in wet plaster, to capture the precise, sharp folds. Leonardo drew them with a softness and realism that was astonishing. His talent was so evident that Verrocchio soon entrusted him with more important work. In a major workshop, a large painting was a team effort. The master would design the composition and perhaps paint the most important figures. Apprentices and assistants would fill in the background, the drapery, the minor characters. Around the year 1475, Verrocchio was working on a significant commission, a painting of the baptism of Christ. It depicts the moment John the Baptist baptizes Jesus in the River Jordan. Verrocchio painted the main figures, the strong, solid forms of Christ and John. He then assigned a portion of the painting to his most promising student, Leonardo. He was to paint one of the two angels kneeling in the foreground. And here, something remarkable happened. While Verrocchio's angel is painted in the traditional, slightly stiff style of the time, Leonardo's angel is different. It is alive. He used the new medium of oil paint, which allowed for subtle blending and a soft, hazy light. The angel's face is turned, looking up at the baptism with an expression of gentle, profound awe. The golden curls of its hair are painted with such delicacy, strand by luminous strand, that they seem to catch the light. The blue of its robes has a depth and richness that makes the other colors in the painting seem flat by comparison. The story, perhaps an embellishment by the art historian Vasari, is that when Verrocchio saw what his young pupil had done, he was so humbled by its beauty that he vowed never to pick up a paintbrush again. While likely not true, the legend speaks to the impact of Leonardo's work. He had not just fulfilled an assignment, he had surpassed his master. He had painted not just the form of an angel, but the soul of one. During this time in Florence, Leonardo's curiosity pushed him beyond the boundaries of the workshop. He became fascinated with the human body itself. To paint a figure that looked real, he reasoned, you must understand what lies beneath the skin. So he began his first anatomical studies. This was not a simple matter. Human dissection was rare and heavily restricted. But he found ways. He studied the bodies of executed criminals, or sought out physicians at the hospital of Santa Maria Nuova who might allow him to observe. Imagine him, late at night, in a cold, stone room, lit by a single flickering candle. The air is heavy with the scent of death and preservatives. With a steady hand, he is not just looking, but exploring. He is tracing the path of a muscle, understanding how it pulls on a bone to create movement. He is sketching the intricate web of tendons in a hand, the very structures that would allow him to hold his own pen. His drawings from this period are not gruesome. They are works of wonder. He is seeking to understand the beautiful, logical machine of the human body. The Florentine workshop was his school, and it taught him the discipline of art. But his own mind, his own insatiable curiosity, was his true guide. He was becoming more than a painter. He was becoming an investigator of reality. In the quiet hours after the workshop had fallen silent, he would fill his notebooks with sketches, with questions, with ideas, the quill scratching softly on the vellum page. Chapter 3. Courting Patrons. By the time he was in his late 20s, Leonardo had absorbed all that Verrocchio's workshop could teach him. He was a certified master in the Painters' Guild of Florence. He had his own studio, his own assistants. Yet, he was restless. Florence, for all its artistic glory, was a city of intense rivalries. Commissions were hard to come by, and Leonardo was not a fast worker. His mind was too full of other ideas, other projects. He would begin a painting like the magnificent Adoration of the Magi, and then leave it unfinished, his attention pulled away by a problem in geometry or a new idea for a machine. He knew that to truly pursue his vast interests, he needed a powerful and wealthy patron. Someone who could provide not just commissions for paintings, but the resources and freedom to explore his engineering and scientific ideas. At that time, the unofficial ruler of Florence was Lorenzo de Medici, known as Lorenzo the Magnificent. He was a great patron of the arts, a poet, a statesman. His court was a glittering center of Renaissance humanism. Leonardo was in his circle, but perhaps not at its center. He was known as a brilliant painter, but also as unreliable, a man who promised more than he delivered. Leonardo needed to showcase the full range of his talents, to prove he was more than just an artist. So he began to present himself not just as a painter, but as an engineer, an architect, a musician, an inventor. He was a man of ideas, a man who could solve problems. One of his most remarkable talents was in music. He had a beautiful singing voice and was a gifted performer on the lyre da braccio, a type of Renaissance viol. But he didn't just play instruments, he invented them. He sketched designs for new kinds of drums, new keyboard instruments, like the viola organista, which would produce the sustained sound of a string instrument with the action of a keyboard. His most famous musical creation from this time was a special lyre. He crafted it himself, mostly from silver, and he made it in a startling and beautiful shape, the skull of a horse. Imagine this object. The cool, smooth feel of polished silver. The elegant, anatomical curves of the skull, transformed into a vessel for music, 0s. The strings stretched across it, promising a sound that was both resonant and unique. When he played it, the story goes, the sound was clearer and more powerful than any other instrument. He was demonstrating that art and science, beauty and function, were one and the same in his mind. But Florence was not the right place for his grandest ambitions. He looked elsewhere, to a city that was less a republic of artists and more a powerful duchy ruled by a single, ambitious man. He looked to Milan and its ruler, Ludovico Sforza, known as Il Moro, the Moor, because of his dark complexion. Around the year 1482, Leonardo made his move. He composed a letter to Ludovico, a sort of job application that is one of the most extraordinary documents of the Renaissance. He knew that Ludovico was more concerned with military power than with paintings of the Madonna. So, in his letter, Leonardo focused on his skills as a military engineer. He wrote a numbered list of 10 incredible capabilities. Listen to the confidence, the sheer breadth of his claims. He said, "I have plans for very light, strong bridges that can be easily carried, with which to pursue and, at times, flee from the enemy." He said, "I know how, when a place is besieged, to take the water out of the trenches and make an infinite variety of bridges, covered ways, and ladders." He described new kinds of cannons, more powerful and easier to transport. He described how to build tunnels silently under rivers or moats. He described armored vehicles, covered, safe, and unassailable, which could break through the enemy ranks. These were the precursors to the modern tank. He offered to create scythed chariots and giant catapults. For 10 points, he listed his skills in warfare, destruction, and defense. And only at the very end, in a short, final paragraph, did he add, almost as an afterthought, "In time of peace, I believe I can give perfect satisfaction, equal to any other, in architecture, in the design of public and private buildings, and in conducting water from one place to another. And then, finally, I can also carry out sculpture in marble, bronze, or clay. Likewise in painting, I can do everything possible, as well as any other, whoever he may be." He was offering himself as a universal genius, a man who could create instruments of war as easily as he could capture beauty on a canvas. It was an irresistible proposal for a ruler like Ludovico Sforza. So Leonardo packed his things. He left Florence, the city of his youth, the city of art. He may have carried with him his silver lyre, a gift for the Duke. He was heading north, to a new court, a new patron, and a new set of challenges that would push his mind in directions he had only just begun to imagine. The Florentine chapter was closing, the sound of its busy workshops fading behind him as he traveled the road to Milan. Chapter 4. Milan and the Horse of Bronze. Milan in the late 15th century was a world away from Florence. It was a city of power, of military might, of opulent display. The court of Ludovico Sforza was a place of grand feasts, elaborate theatricals, and political intrigue. Ludovico was a shrewd and ambitious ruler, and he wanted his court to be the most magnificent in all of Italy. He needed a man who could not only paint, but who could design festivals, create stage machinery, and invent marvels to dazzle his guests and intimidate his rivals. In Leonardo, he found his man. For nearly 2 decades, Leonardo served the Duke of Milan. He was given the title Pictor et Ingeniarius Ducalis, painter and engineer to the Duke. And his duties were incredibly varied. One day, he might be designing the costumes for a mask. Imagine him sketching flowing robes of silk and velvet, decorated with intricate patterns of stars and planets for a festival of paradise. He designed the stage sets, creating revolving stages and mechanical heavens from which actors portraying gods and goddesses could descend. He used gears and pulleys, counterweights and levers, all the secrets of mechanics, to create illusions that seemed like magic to the courtly audience. The scent of perfumed smoke would fill the hall as a mechanical mountain opened up to reveal a hidden scene. Another day, he would be tasked with planning the heating and water systems for the Duke's castle, the Castello Sforzesco. He would be in the damp, cool undercrofts, sketching plans for canals and plumbing, ensuring the new Duchess had warm baths. He was an architect, a city planner, a hydraulic engineer. But amidst all this work, one project came to dominate his time in Milan. It was a project of monumental scale, a tribute to Ludovico's father, Francesco Sforza. Ludovico wanted to erect the largest equestrian statue the world had ever seen. A horse of bronze, with his father as the rider, a symbol of Sforza power that would dwarf all others. And he gave this immense challenge to Leonardo. Leonardo threw himself into the project with passion. He called it simply Il Cavallo, the horse. For him, this was not just a statue. It was a scientific problem of immense complexity. First, he had to perfect the anatomy of the horse. He didn't want to sculpt a generic, symbolic horse. He wanted to sculpt a real horse, with every muscle, vein, and sinew rendered with perfect accuracy. He spent countless hours in the ducal stables. The air was warm and smelled of hay and horses. He stood for hours, sketching. He drew the powerful hindquarters of the great war horses. He drew the gentle, intelligent eyes of the Arabian steeds. He measured their proportions with calipers. He even dissected horse carcasses to understand the underlying structure of bone and muscle. His notebooks from this period are filled with thousands of sketches of horses in every conceivable pose, walking, trotting, galloping, and, most challenging of all, rearing. His initial plan was to depict the horse rearing up on its hind legs, a dynamic, powerful pose. But the engineering challenge was staggering. A bronze statue of that size, balanced on just 2 legs, would be incredibly unstable. After years of study, he changed the design to a more stable, trotting pose, but one that still conveyed immense power and movement. By 1493, after more than a decade of work, he was ready to create the full-scale model. In a special workshop, he and his assistants built a mountain of clay. It stood over 24 feet high, more than 7 meters. Imagine the sight of it. A colossal horse, so large a man could stand beneath its belly. Its clay skin was perfectly sculpted, every muscle flexed, its mane seeming to ripple in an invisible wind. It was a masterpiece of sculpture, even in its temporary, fragile form. It was put on public display in the courtyard of the castle, and the people of Milan marveled at it. They called it the Gran Cavallo. The next step was the most difficult of all, the casting. To cast such a huge object in bronze was a feat of engineering never before attempted. Leonardo devised a revolutionary plan. Instead of casting it in many small pieces to be welded together later, he planned to cast the entire horse in a single, seamless pour. This would require a massive furnace, a complex system of molds and channels, and precise timing. 0 S He filled notebooks with calculations and diagrams, planning every detail of the process. He calculated that he would need some 160,000 pounds of bronze. The clay model stood waiting. The plans were ready. The bronze was being collected. But history intervened. The political situation in Italy was unstable. In 1494, the King of France invaded Italy, and Ludovico Sforza needed to defend his duchy. He needed cannons, and the vast quantity of bronze that had been set aside for Leonardo's horse was requisitioned and melted down to make weapons. It must have been a quiet, devastating blow for Leonardo. Years of work, of study, of planning, all for nothing. The horse would never be cast. A few years later, in 1499, the French invaded Milan again, and this time they were successful. Ludovico Sforza was driven from power. The French soldiers who occupied the city saw the giant clay horse standing in the courtyard. They did not see it as a work of art. They saw it as a target. They used the Grand Cavallo for archery practice. The magnificent clay model, pelted by arrows, slowly crumbled and disintegrated under the rain and sun until nothing was left. The horse of bronze, the monument that was to be his greatest masterpiece, remained only as a collection of beautiful drawings in a notebook, a ghost of an idea, a dream that had turned back into clay and dust. Chapter 5. The Last Supper. While the grand, public project of the bronze horse was consuming so much of his energy, Leonardo undertook another, much quieter commission in Milan. In the silent, peaceful monastery of Santa Maria delle Grazie, the Duke asked him to paint a mural in the refectory, the dining hall where the Dominican friars would eat their meals in contemplative silence. The subject was a traditional one for a refectory, the Last Supper. Imagine this space. A long, high-ceilinged room. The air is cool and still. The only sounds are the soft shuffle of sandals on the stone floor, the distant chime of a bell. Light filters in from high windows, falling gently on the long wooden tables. It is a place of prayer and meditation. And on the large, blank wall at one end of the room, Leonardo was to create his vision. He began work around 1495. And from the very beginning, he approached this task in his own unconventional way. The traditional method for painting a mural was fresco. This involved applying pigments to a thin layer of wet plaster. As the plaster dried, the paint would chemically bond with the wall, creating a durable, permanent image. But fresco has a major drawback. It requires the artist to work quickly, to finish a section before the plaster dries. Leonardo could not work this way. He was a slow, deliberate painter. He liked to build up his images in thin, translucent layers. He liked to be able to change his mind, to scrape away a section and repaint it, to refine a detail over days or even weeks. His process was one of contemplation and revision. So, he decided to experiment. Instead of fresco, he would treat the wall like a large wooden panel. He sealed the stone wall with a layer of pitch and gesso, creating a smooth, dry surface. Then, he began to paint using tempera grassa, a mix of egg yolk and oil paint. This allowed him the freedom he craved. He could work at his own pace, capturing the subtle details and emotional depth that he envisioned. but it was a fateful decision. The damp wall did not bond with the paint in the same way wet plaster would have. The masterpiece he was creating was, from its very first brushstroke, tragically fragile. He also reimagined the scene itself. Traditionally, the Last Supper was depicted as a static, solemn moment. Christ and the 12 apostles would be shown in a line, often with Judas isolated on the opposite side of the table. Leonardo wanted to capture a single dramatic instant. The moment just after Christ has spoken the devastating words, "One of you will betray me." He wanted to paint not just the event, but the reaction, what he called the motions of the mind. He envisioned a wave of emotion sweeping down the table, a human drama of shock, denial, fear, and sorrow. He spent an immense amount of time just thinking and observing. The prior of the monastery grew impatient. He complained to Duke Ludovico that Leonardo would sometimes stand before the wall for hours, his arms crossed, just staring at the work in progress, without picking up a brush. When confronted, Leonardo explained that the greatest work is done in the mind, that he was composing the scene, imagining the figures, before his hand ever touched the wall. He searched the streets of Milan for faces that would match his vision for the apostles. He would follow interesting-looking people for hours, studying their features, their gestures, their expressions, sketching them in his notebook. He looked for a man with a noble, gentle face for St. James the Less. He sought out a man hardened by life for the face of Peter. The composition he created was a revolution. Christ is at the center, calm and resigned, a figure of divine peace in the midst of a human storm. The apostles are not in a straight line, but are clustered in 4 groups of 3, reacting and interacting with each other. 0s. One group leans in, questioning. Another recoils in horror. Hands are thrown up in the air. Fingers point. Whispers are exchanged. It is a symphony of human emotion. And Judas is not isolated. He is there, among the others, part of the group. But he is cloaked in shadow. He leans back, clutching a small bag of coins, his face a mask of guilt and defensiveness. He has just knocked over the salt cellar, a subtle omen of misfortune. For years, Leonardo worked on that wall, in the quiet of the refectory. The friars would come and go, their soft chants echoing in the halls, as he painstakingly brought each figure to life. The light in the painting seems to come from the real window on the left wall of the room, blending the painted world with the real one. When it was finally finished, around 1498, it was hailed as a miracle of painting. Never before had so much psychological depth and drama been captured in a single image. But the tragedy of his experimental technique began to reveal itself almost immediately. The paint did not adhere properly to the damp wall. Within just a few years, the colors began to flake, the image started to fade. It was like a beautiful, vivid dream that begins to dissolve upon waking. The Last Supper, perhaps his most famous and influential work, was also his most ephemeral. It existed in its full glory for only a fleeting moment in time, a masterpiece captured under the dim monastery light, destined to become a ghost of its former self. Chapter 6: Maps, Machines, and Anatomy. With the fall of Milan and the loss of his patron, Ludovico Sforza, Leonardo entered a period of wandering. For the next several years, he traveled through Italy, from Mantua to Venice, and back to Florence. He was a man without a steady position, but his mind was as active as ever. This was a time when his notebooks became his primary workshop. Imagine these notebooks. There are thousands of pages filled with sketches, diagrams, and notes. The paper is of different kinds, some rough, some smooth. The ink is a brownish color, faded with time. And the writing is a strange, spidery script that flows from right to left. This is his famous mirror writing. To read it, you must hold it up to a mirror. Why did he write this way? Perhaps to keep his thoughts secret, though a simple mirror could unlock them. More likely, as a left-handed man, it was simply easier and cleaner to write from right to left, pulling the pen rather than pushing it, avoiding smudging the fresh ink with his hand. It was a practical solution, typical of his way of thinking. And what did he fill these pages with? Everything. His mind was a universe of curiosity. He filled pages with designs for machines of war. These were not just fantasies. They were detailed engineering plans. He drew a giant crossbow, so large it had to be wound with a crank. He drew a scythed chariot, a terrifying vehicle with spinning blades protruding from its wheels, designed to mow down enemy soldiers. He drew his armored car again, the one he had promised to Ludovico, showing the internal gears and the positions for 8 men to operate it. He was a man of peace, yet his mind could conceive of the most formidable instruments of destruction. He saw it as a puzzle, an intellectual challenge. He filled pages with studies of water. He was still obsessed with its movement. He drew the flow of water around obstacles, the formation of vortices, the patterns of waves. 0s. He designed canals to make rivers navigable. He sketched plans for a revolving bridge that could be quickly deployed for an army to cross a river and then swung away. He dreamed of controlling the very flow of water, of reshaping the landscape. He filled pages with the study of flight. The dream of the bird was still with him. He designed flying machines, or ornithopters. He based them on the anatomy of a bat's wing, a structure of membrane stretched over a light frame. He designed a machine where a man would lie prone, pedaling with his feet and cranking with his arms to flap the giant wings. He designed a parachute, a pyramid of linen cloth that he calculated could allow a man to fall from any height without injury. He designed a helicopter-like machine, an aerial screw, that he believed could bore its way up into the air. He knew he was on the verge of a great secret. The great bird, he wrote, will take its first flight, filling the world with amazement. And he returned, with even greater intensity, to the study of the human body. His anatomical studies from this period are among his most breathtaking achievements. He was no longer just sketching the surface muscles. He was delving deeper. He obtained permission to dissect more than 30 human corpses, men and women of all ages. Again, imagine the scene. The quiet, cold room, the flickering lamplight casting long shadows. With meticulous care and a profound sense of reverence, he explored the inner universe of the human form. He was the first person in history to accurately draw the human spine with its correct curvature. He drew the heart and correctly identified it as a muscle with 4 chambers. He studied the valves and theorized about how they worked to pump blood through the body. He drew the intricate branching of the bronchial tubes in the lungs. His most beautiful and tender anatomical drawings are those of the womb. He drew a fetus curled inside, connected by the umbilical cord. He cut away the layers of the uterine wall to show the child nestled safely within. These drawings are not just scientifically accurate, they are works of profound wonder and beauty. He was looking at the very origin of human life. He drew the skull, layer by layer, showing the sinuses and the cavities of the brain. He injected hot wax into the ventricles of an ox's brain to create a perfect cast of their shape. He was searching for the physical location of the soul, the sensus communis, where all the senses met. These notebooks were his private world, a place where his mind could leap from art to science, from engineering to anatomy, without boundaries. He was having a silent conversation with nature, trying to understand its fundamental principles. Each page is a testament to the idea that everything is connected. The spiral of a seashell, the swirl of water in a river, the curl of a human hair, the vortex of a storm. He saw the same patterns repeating everywhere, on every scale. The quill would scratch late into the night, filling the pages with images and ideas, a vast and secret library of one man's mind. Chapter 7. Rome's Promise. Borgia's War. In the year 1502, Leonardo's wanderings led him into the service of one of the most ruthless and feared men in all of Italy, Cesare Borgia. Cesare was the son of Pope Alexander VI, and he was carving out a kingdom for himself in central Italy with brilliant strategy and brutal force. He was everything Leonardo was not, a man of swift, decisive, and often violent action. But Cesare Borgia was also a man who recognized genius. He had no need for paintings or courtly entertainments. He needed a supreme military engineer, and he hired Leonardo as his architect and general engineer. For about a year, Leonardo traveled with Borgia's army. It was a strange pairing, the gentle, contemplative artist and the fearsome, ambitious warlord. Leonardo's role was to survey the territories Borgia conquered, to design fortifications, and to advise on military strategy. He was given a pass that allowed him to travel freely, to demand assistance from any of Borgia's officials, and to inspect any fortress or public building. During this time, he created some of the most advanced and beautiful maps the world had ever seen. His map of the town of Imola is a masterpiece of cartography. It is an iconographic map, meaning it shows the town as if viewed from directly above, a bird's-eye view. This was a revolutionary concept. To create it, he had to invent new surveying instruments. He used a magnetic compass to measure bearings and an odometer of his own design to measure distances. He walked the streets of the town, taking meticulous measurements, and then translated that data into a perfectly scaled, precise plan. The map is not just functional, it is beautiful, rendered in soft watercolors. It is a work of both science and art. He was applying his scientific mind to the art of war. He designed new defenses, studied the weak points in existing city walls, and planned how to divert rivers to either defend a position or flood an enemy camp. He was living the life he had described in his letter to Ludovico Sforza all those years ago. But the brutality of Borgia's campaign must have weighed on him. He was a man who loved life in all its forms, who became a vegetarian because he could not bear to cause suffering to animals. To be in the midst of constant violence, to see his own inventions potentially used to cause death and destruction, must have created a deep conflict within him. After less than a year, he left Cesare Borgia's service and returned to the relative peace of Florence. Florence, however, had its own rivalries, and a new, younger star was rising in the art world, a fiery, passionate, and brilliant sculptor named Michelangelo. Where Leonardo was elegant, charming, and private, Michelangelo was rough, intense, and solitary. 0:10s. They were artistic giants, and they did not like each other. The city of Florence set up a direct competition between them. They were both commissioned to paint enormous murals of famous Florentine military victories on opposite walls of the great council hall in the Palazzo Vecchio. Leonardo chose the Battle of Anghiari. Michelangelo chose the Battle of Cascina. It was the clash of the titans. Leonardo's design was a swirling, chaotic vortex of men and horses locked in furious combat. He focused on the raw, savage energy of the fight, what he called the bestial madness of war. Michelangelo's design depicted a group of soldiers surprised by a call to arms while bathing in the river, a powerful showcase of the nude male form in dynamic poses. All of Florence was buzzing with the rivalry. Artists and citizens would come to see the full-scale preparatory drawings, the cartoons that each artist created. They were hung on public display, and young artists like Raphael came to study and learn from them. But, like so many of Leonardo's grand projects, his battle mural was doomed. He again decided to experiment with his painting technique. He tried to revive an ancient Roman method called encaustic painting, which involved mixing pigments with hot wax. He set up a huge scaffold in the great hall and began to paint. But to make the wax colors bind to the wall, they needed to be heated. He lit large charcoal braziers, but the heat was not evenly distributed. The colors on the upper part of the mural did not set properly, and the wax began to drip and run, smearing the image. The experiment was a disastrous failure. Heartbroken, Leonardo abandoned the project. Michelangelo was called to Rome by the Pope before he even began to paint his own mural. Neither masterpiece was ever completed. During these years, Leonardo also dreamed of another great engineering feat. He was called to Rome to work for the Pope's brother, Giuliano de Medici. One project he undertook was a plan to drain the Pontine marshes, a vast, swampy area south of Rome that was a source of malaria. For centuries, people had tried and failed to reclaim this land. Leonardo, with his profound understanding of hydraulics, drew up a detailed plan for a system of canals that he believed would succeed. It was a brilliant plan, but like so many others, it was never funded, never realized. Rome, which should have been the crowning glory of his career, was a place of frustration. He felt old and overlooked. While younger artists like Michelangelo and Raphael were getting all the major commissions from the Pope. In his notebook, he wrote a sad, quiet lament. "The Medici made me, and the Medici destroyed me." His time in the service of war and in the shadow of rivalry was coming to an end. A new chapter and a new country was waiting for him. Chapter 8: Mona Lisa and the Mysterious Smile. Of all the portraits ever painted, one is more famous than any other. A small painting on a panel of poplar wood. A woman seated in a loggia, with a vast, dreamlike landscape stretching out behind her. Her hands are crossed gently in her lap, and on her face the faintest, most enigmatic smile in the history of art. She is known as Mona Lisa, or La Gioconda. Who was she? Most historians believe she was Lisa Gherardini, the wife of a Florentine silk merchant named Francesco del Giocondo. The commission was likely a private one, to celebrate the birth of their son or the purchase of a new home. Leonardo began the painting around 1503 during his second period in Florence. But this was no ordinary portrait. For Leonardo, it became something more. It became a laboratory for his most advanced artistic theories, a painting he would work on for the rest of his life. He never delivered it to the merchant who commissioned it. He kept it with him, carrying it on his travels from Italy to France, constantly adding to it, refining it. Imagine him in his studio. The light is soft, perhaps diffused through thin linen screens over the windows. The scent of linseed oil and turpentine hangs in the air. Lisa del Giocondo sits patiently. It is said that Leonardo hired musicians and jesters to play and tell stories while she sat, to keep her expression from becoming stiff and formal. He wanted to capture something fleeting, a living presence, not a static likeness. The true magic of the Mona Lisa lies in Leonardo's pioneering use of a technique he perfected, called sfumato. The word means vanished or smoked in Italian. It is the technique of painting with incredibly soft, hazy outlines, with no harsh lines. He achieved this by applying dozens of very thin, almost transparent layers of oil glaze. Each layer was a whisper of color. This allowed him to create incredibly subtle transitions between light and shadow. Look closely at the corners of her eyes and the corners of her mouth. They are not clearly defined. They are lost in a soft shadow. This is the secret to her mysterious smile. Because the edges are blurred, your eye can never quite settle on her expression. When you look directly at her mouth, the smile seems to vanish. When you look at her eyes, the smile seems to reappear in your peripheral vision. It is alive, it flickers, it changes with your own perception. It is the motion of the mind captured perfectly. And then there is the landscape behind her. It is not a real place. It is a landscape from Leonardo's imagination, a world of jagged mountains, winding rivers, and misty atmosphere. It is a geological dreamscape. He uses what is called atmospheric perspective. Objects in the distance are painted with cooler, bluer, and less distinct tones, mimicking the effect of the atmosphere on our vision. This creates an incredible sense of depth. But look closer still. The horizon line on the left side of the painting does not match the horizon line on the right. The landscape itself is impossible. This creates a subtle, unsettling feeling. It makes the figure of Mona Lisa seem to loom larger, more monumental. She is both a real woman and a universal, almost divine presence. She is the synthesis of all his studies. His study of anatomy is there, in the perfect structure of her hands. His study of geology is in the rocks behind her. His study of optics and light is in the sfumato. His study of psychology is in her ambiguous expression. She is the culmination of a lifetime of looking, of questioning, of understanding. For more than a dozen years, this small wooden panel was his constant companion. He would set it up on a portable easel in Florence, in Milan, in Rome. He would add another tiny, translucent glaze to the veil, another soft touch to the shadow on her cheek. It was his touchstone, his masterpiece, his secret. During these years of wandering, his notebooks continued to be his most faithful companions. Tucked away in his luggage, these coded journals held the vast sum of his knowledge. Sketches of water, designs for architecture, dissections of the human heart, and fables he wrote for amusement. He was an old man now, his hair and beard long and white. He had seen great triumphs and bitter failures. He had served dukes and warlords and popes. And through it all, he carried this small portrait of a Florentine merchant's wife, a quiet woman with a secret smile, as if she held the answer to some question he had been asking his entire life. The painting was more than a portrait. It was a conversation between the artist and his own soul, a conversation that would only end with his final breath. Chapter 9. Twilight in France. In the year 1516, Leonardo was an old man. He was 64 years old. His great patrons in Italy were gone. A new generation of artists, like Raphael and Michelangelo, now dominated the scene in Rome. Leonardo might have faded into obscurity, a relic of a bygone era, but a new admirer appeared, a young and vibrant king from across the Alps. King François I of France was a great lover of the Italian Renaissance. He saw Leonardo not as an old man, but as a living legend, the embodiment of wisdom and genius. And he made Leonardo an offer he could not refuse. He invited Leonardo to come to France, not to work, but to live. He gave him the title of first painter, engineer, and architect to the king. He gave him a generous pension and a beautiful manor house to live in, the Château de Clos-Lucé, connected by an underground tunnel to the king's own royal residence, the Château d'Amboise. So Leonardo packed his belongings one last time. He gathered his precious notebooks, the thousands of pages that held his life's work. And he packed 3 paintings, a portrait of St. John the Baptist, a painting of the Virgin and Child with St. Anne, and his beloved unfinished Mona Lisa. With his faithful assistants, he made the long, arduous journey across the Alps into France. His life at Clos-Lucé was one of peaceful twilight. The chateau was comfortable, with warm fireplaces and windows that looked out over the gentle Loire Valley. The air was fresh, the light was soft. Here, he was not burdened with demanding commissions or impossible deadlines. He was revered as a sage. The young King François would often walk through the tunnel from his castle to visit Leonardo. Imagine the scene, the energetic, richly dressed young king, sitting for hours, listening with rapt attention to the old, white-bearded artist. Leonardo would talk to him about art, about philosophy, about engineering. He would show the king his notebooks, explaining his designs for flying machines, his studies of anatomy, his plans for ideal cities. For the king, it was like speaking with a philosopher from the ancient world. He called Leonardo simply mon père, my father. Leonardo's health was failing. A stroke had paralyzed his right hand. As a left-handed man, he could still draw and write, but the fine motor control needed for painting was likely gone. He could no longer paint, but his mind was as sharp as ever. He spent his final years organizing his vast collection of notebooks. He sorted the pages by subject: anatomy, optics, water, flight. It was as if he was trying to put his own universe in order, to create a great encyclopedia of knowledge for posterity. He knew his time was short, and he wanted his life's work to be preserved. He still tinkered with mechanical puzzles. For the king, he designed a mechanical lion. On command, this lion could walk forward, and when struck on the chest, its body would open up to reveal a cluster of lilies, the symbol of the French monarchy. It was a final, playful piece of courtly magic from the great inventor. He continued to dream of grand engineering projects, like a plan to connect the Loire and Saône rivers with a system of canals, creating a waterway across France. 0s. Even in his last years, he was thinking on a vast, landscape-altering scale. As the end drew near, he put his affairs in order. He drew up his will, leaving his notebooks, his drawings, and his instruments to his most loyal student, Francesco Melzi. He left money for the poor and for masses to be said for his soul. On the 2nd of May, in the year 1519, at the age of 67, Leonardo da Vinci died peacefully at Clos-Lucé. A legend grew that he died in the arms of King François I. While a beautiful image, it is likely not true, as the king was probably at another castle on that day. But the story reflects the deep affection and reverence the king felt for him. He was buried in the church of Saint Florentine at the Château d'Amboise. The church was later destroyed during the French Revolution, and his exact gravesite was lost for a time. But his true monument, his real legacy, was not a tomb of stone. It was the incredible collection of notebooks he left behind, a testament to a human mind that never, ever stopped asking, why? The gentle genius from the small town of Vinci had finally come to rest, his long journey over, the twilight fading into a soft and final night. And so, our journey with Leonardo comes to a gentle close. The story is finished, but the spirit of his curiosity lingers in the quiet air around you. Let your breath be slow and deep. Feel the weight of your body, comfortable and secure, as you drift in this peaceful space between waking and dreaming. Picture, for a moment, a single candle burning in a dark room. It is the candle on Leonardo's desk, in Florence, in Milan, in Amboise. Its small, steady flame illuminates a page filled with sketches. A bird's wing, the petals of a flower, the smile of a woman. The flame flickers and the workshop fades, but the light of that curiosity, that quiet, persistent search for knowledge and beauty, never truly goes out. It glows softly down through the centuries, a reminder of the infinite wonders that hide in plain sight, waiting to be seen. You have walked with him through the rolling hills of Tuscany, through the bustling workshops of Florence, and into the quiet chateaux of France. You have felt the cool stone of the monastery and smelled the sweet scent of linseed oil. Now, it is time to let these images dissolve, like sfumato, into the soft shadows of your own mind. Let them become part of your dreams. There is nothing left to do, nothing to solve, only to rest. May your sleep be as deep and as peaceful as a still river at midnight. May your dreams be filled with gentle light and beautiful ideas. Rest now. Sleep now. Good night.